Before we begin, I want to apologize. Originally, I was going to respond to a Ben Shapiro video where he justified Israel's war crimes against the Palestinians. The problem is, it's kind of hard to use the arguments, murdering civilians is bad and so is settler colonialism, and don't displace people that live there, in response to a video where it feels like Ben Shapiro used his entire 6th grade book report about the history of Israel to justify the apartheid. The video is just as headache-inducing as one of his failed screenplays. But don't worry, as there's plenty of other videos that crave just as much Palestinian blood as the video I was originally going to respond to. This brings us to today's video, Emergency Israel Appeal, the fundraising video for Christians United for Israel.
October the 7th was the end of the world as we knew it. Before that day, though, the Jewish state was under constant threat.
What do you mean by constant threat? Do you mean people who disagree with the Israeli government's draconian policies against the Palestinians and anti-Zionist Jews who lived there even before early Zionist colonization in 1882?
We thought their worst days were behind them. Before that day, the days of mass Jewish murder were over.
There have been plenty of incidents where Nazis have stormed synagogues in the US and murdered Jews. Given how, like you, I live in the United States, I fear being killed by Nazis far more than I fear being killed by the Palestinian children the officials the Israeli government you want us to support wants to kill.
We were tragically mistaken. But let's not make the same mistake again.
We must not make the same mistakes again. Also, send money to the government who themselves admitted to wanting to raise Gaza to the ground and hold the civilian population living in Gaza accountable for Hamas's crimes, who turned off electricity and water to the Gaza Strip, and who fired white phosphorus during their attack on Gaza, an action considered to be a war crime by the Geneva Conventions.
Hamas is not a militant group. We must rightly call them what they are, rapists. They are murderers. They are terrorists.
I don't disagree that Hamas are terrorists. Specifically, a terrorist organization that Netanyahu himself suggested his Likud party should use to destabilize the Palestinian liberation movement. I should also mention, before we go any further, that the headlines of a German tourist being killed by Hamas and Israeli babies being beheaded, which reeks the anti-Semitic blood libel myth, have since been debunked.
This is not a provocation. This is a massacre. This is not a response to an occupation. This is a massacre.
I'm not going to defend Hamas. Their attack against civilians is disgusting. To say that it is not a response to occupation, however, is to ignore the genocidal actions Zionists have been doing for over 75 years. In the name of settler colonialism, of course. One of the more notorious events would be the Deir Yassin massacre on April 9, 1948, where Zionist paramilitaries, including Lehigh, a group that was willing to negotiate with Nazi Germany, massacred at least 107 Palestinian villagers, including women and children. In the aftermath of the massacre, Zionists used it as a threat that any Palestinian still living in the apartheid state of Israel would meet the same fate as the victims of Deir Yassin.
This is not a flare-up. This is a massacre. This is not just terrorism. This is a massacre. This is not a holy war. This is not us versus them. This is not complicated. This is a massacre.
Everything about this is screaming manufacturing consent. Also, I have a hard time believing you when you say this isn't an us versus them conflict. You and your father are Christian Zionists, the us, and you feel that the Palestinian liberation movement as a whole, not just Hamas, the them, is preventing Jews from returning to Israel, which you consider necessary for the second coming of Christ.
God willing, our lawmakers will act with all deliberate speed, not only to replenish Israel's shield, but to ensure she has a sword so sharp that no enemy can prevail against it in the future. Unprecedented times call for unprecedented action.
Unprecedented actions, including supporting a government using chemical weaponry against the Palestinian civilian population in Gaza and bombing hospitals with Palestinian refugees inside. I was wondering when the Christian Zionist bloodlust would show up.
As such, this morning, the Christians United for Israel board unanimously decided to immediately send $1 million to organizations in Israel addressing life-saving needs there on the ground, including hospitals, ambulances, and first responders. 100% of the funds raised will go to Israel to address the humanitarian needs resulting from this horrific war. And we are asking you to join us in this effort.
I guarantee that money isn't going to hospitals. The money they're asking you to donate is either going into John Hagee's bank account or it's going to the IDF, who will use that money to bomb more hospitals in Gaza, especially after the Al-Ali Baptist Hospital was bombed by the IDF, and at least 500 Palestinians were murdered, including women and children. This is less about defeating Hamas and more about committing genocide against the Palestinians.
We must act without delay, both in word and deed. Statements of support are welcome, but on their own, they are insufficient. Because love is not what you say, love is what you do. So join us in this fight.
Not going to happen. Putting aside the fact that I'm opposed to Zionism, which is a form of settler colonialism, you only want people to join the fight and Hamas to be defeated so that the rapture can happen. You don't care about dead Jews. If you did, you would condemn every Nazi terrorist attack on synagogues in the United States.
For Israel's deliverance will come, but if we do nothing, it is we who will perish.
If we do nothing, it is we who will perish gives the illusion away, doesn't it? John Hagee is a televangelist who believes that if you don't donate money into either his personal bank account or to help the Israeli government commit war crimes against Palestinian children, then the rapture won't happen and John Hagee and his supporters will burn in hell.
Click the link below to donate, or go to cufi.org to give and show your support for the state of Israel and the Jewish people. Join us today in this righteous cause.
Yeah, I won't join you, and I'm sure not helping you donate money to support Israel's war crimes. John Hagee is a monster who believes that Israel's war against Hamas is necessary for the rapture to occur. After this video was released, the Israeli government turned off electricity for Palestinians, they fired white phosphorus into Gaza, they bombed the escape route that the government themselves said was safe, and more recently, they bombed a hospital where Palestinian refugees were hiding out. Also, we've seen the post-9/11 anti-Muslim hate get even worse, as now Palestinians are being targeted. Anti-Muslim rhetoric spewed by Zionist organizations, including the ADL, resulted in the death of Wadia al-Fayoumi, a 6-year-old boy whose only crime was being Palestinian. That concludes today's video, but before I sign off, I'd like to include some charities providing support for the Palestinian civilians impacted from Israel's war crimes. You can find them in the description below. As an anti-Zionist Jew myself, I'll do whatever I can to support Palestinian civilians in their struggle against the genocidal policies of the Israeli government. Until next time, I'm Danny Quartz. Thank you all for watching.